Who's rising? Who's falling? Let's talk about it. Welcome into Fantasy Baseball today on Wednesday, January 12th, not 20th. Don't want to jump the gun yet. I am Frank Stampfl, joined by my buddies, Scott White and Chris Towers. And congrats to Scott. First, we get the Atlanta Braves. He gets the Atlanta Braves. Now the Georgia Bulldogs win the national championship. Congrats to you, Scotty.
Thank you, Frank. Yeah, it's a strange feeling. This is, I imagine this is sort of what a Boston area fan must have felt like 15, 20 years ago, where it's like, man, I'm just so used to being sports fan victim that now I don't know what to do with this run of success. But like, you can't play that card anymore. Like, really ever again, if you think about it. I am at roughly the midpoint of my life. Not to jinx it or anything.
I hope a little longer, a little less.
Maybe a little longer, but you know, about halfway through the average life expectancy. And then I get this happen, two of my teams winning in the same year. So I think I'll be dead before I have a chance to accrue that kind of sports victim currency again. I don't think I'll ever have the chance to experience where I was prior to these championships for two of the three teams that I hold dear.
As long as you don't, do the Boston sports fan thing where you're like, we're still the underdogs, and like, don't do that thing. You know, I remember it's probably 5 or 6 years ago. I was talking to someone who's just a little bit younger than me, and he was doing like a Boston sports fans. You know, we've been through a lot of heartache, and it's like, this guy was like 26 at the time. And like the Red Sox won in 2004. So he was like 14. And I mean, really, even going back to the Patriots in 2001, he was like 7 the last time that like Boston hadn't won a bunch of championships. You don't get to co-opt your parents' grief for your personality. All right?
Yeah.
That's
Must be nice. Must be nice, Scotty. I mean, I have no idea what it feels like to win
come on.
I mean, really, you only root for one good team.
You are correct.
And they haven't won in like 14 years?
In all seriousness, look, I've seen enough in my life. That's totally fine. But I'm in a bit of a drought. I mean, the Yankees, the Jets, the Knicks, it's
I forgot you were a Jets fan.
We love to see it. We really love to see.
I forgot you were a Jets fan. That is tough.
Yeah, it's a little tough.
Yeah, I mean, Yankees, like, it has been an unusually long drought for them.
The Rangers won one when you were a kid, right? Were you born?
Don't know a single thing about hockey, Chris. Wayne Gretzky? Who's that? Chris, it's really cold in New York right now. How you doing? How you holding up?
I had to turn off my space heater under my desk when we started the podcast because it was making too much noise. And yeah, no, it's fine. It's fine. My dog, for some reason today, decided he needed to go out like 4 times. And real jerk move by Steven.
Yeah, pets.
But yeah, it's fine. It's fine.
The dog's name is Steven?
Stevie Nicks, but we call him Steve or Stevie or Stove.
That's right. It always kind of weirds me out, pets that are given like human names, like really ordinary. But you're naming it after celebrities, and that's a little different, I guess.
Yeah. It's like having a dog named Barry or something. That's just the first name that came to my head. But pets have a weird way of trolling humans. It happens quite often.
There's
Speaking of which,
David.
There's David Bowie. For those who are watching here.
Like came and hissed in Chris's ear. I'm sorry for calling it an it, by the way.
Today on the podcast, we are going to talk about the biggest ADP risers and fallers since the lockout began. That's using NFBC, ADP. And I have a few, real quick items before we actually get to those things. Chris, don't get yourself, don't injure yourself there with David Bowie. That seems, I hear the purring in the microphone. That is amazing. Mention the lockout, Scott. Speaking of the lockout, we've got some movement here. MLB is scheduled to make a new core economics proposal to the Players Association this Thursday. And I'm sure that there will be a lot of this kind of back and forth, but it's progress and, trying to remain positive here.
Yeah. Yeah, no, we were just talking, was it just yesterday? The last podcast where I was saying, well, hopefully it's actually before the end of the month and they're just trying not to overpromise and underdeliver. And I didn't really believe myself when I said that, but it looks like that may be the case. Now, that doesn't mean they're going to be anywhere close to an agreement yet, but I would rather see them at least working to get there as opposed to not doing anything for weeks at a time.
Yeah, very happy to see this movement. Hey, real quick, number 2, and I'll throw this one your way, Chris. Camden Yards is apparently changing their dimensions to help reduce home runs. 277 home runs were hit in Baltimore last season, by far the most in baseball. It doesn't help that their pitching is routinely crap. It's not very good. I think we could say that. But they're raising the left field wall from 7 to 12 feet and apparently are planning to push that wall back as far as 30 feet from home plate. So could help John Means, and it could hurt right-handed power like Ryan Mountcastle and Trey Mancini. Chris, any thoughts here on Camden?
I know I'm not Chris, but 30 feet?
I hate
like 10 is a lot.
I
30?
mean, raising your left field wall from 7 to 12 feet is quite a bit. I mean,
Yeah.
that's pushing into like, is it, no, progressive? That's not what it's called anymore, right? Yeah, it's progressive field.
It might be.
Where Cleveland plays.
That's taller than 12, but yeah.
But yeah, you're starting to get into that kind of area, and I mean, 30 feet is a really long way. They're gonna have to remove the bullpens and all that stuff. I don't know. I would guess it's gonna be kind of angled, and so it'll be 30 feet back in one spot, but not quite as long everywhere else. But
Right.
it's bad news for right-handed hitters in Baltimore. Now, the good news is there aren't that many of them who matter. I would expect this doesn't really hurt like Cedric Mullins, especially because I'm not expecting him to hit 30 home runs again, and it's the stolen bases and the overall production that really helps him. But
Now
Ryan
I
Mountcastle and Trey
happen to
Mancini-
look into this. So if I can
Yes.
give the numbers, Mullins hit 22 of his 30 home runs at home last year, but only one was to left field. He pulled almost all of them. On the other hand, Ryan Mountcastle and Trey Mancini both hit about 2/3 of their home runs at home. And I didn't look to see how many they pulled, but I assume it was the majority. They're right-handed hitters, unlike Mullins. So, yeah, pretty worried for them. Pretty hopeful for John Means, who's an extreme fly ball pitcher.
yes,
Um,
yeah, I think it's
no
good
idea.
news for John Means.
I have no idea how that park is going to play now. I mean, I've never heard of a team. Like Chris said, 30 feet is the maximum. It's not going to be uniformly moved 30 feet back, but still, that's when I was looking into how many feet it was being pushed back, I was prepared to be shocked if it was as many as 15, Yeah. 30. Gosh.
Yeah.
And
And that's as much as 30 feet. Like, that's the furthest they can push it. I don't know if they're going to push it actually that far, but it's, that's the number that's being thrown out there right now. So definitely would not hurt John Means.
I would think it probably hurts Trey Mancini a little bit more than Ryan Mountcastle, just because, at least based on last year, he was a little more middling when it comes to like the quality of contact and stuff like that. But, both of them ranked well above average in terms of, barrel rate and expected slug and stuff like that. So I think Mancini was a little more in the just average range, but I think, look, it's easy to overreact to this kind of thing, but you have to remember it's half their games, and they'll still hit home runs to center. They'll still hit home runs the other way. Like it's not like I would expect maybe a difference of like 3 home runs in expected output, but even that, the problem with home runs is they're such a rare event that it's hard to separate noise from what the actual impact would be anyway. So yeah, I don't know.
I agree with you, Chris. I think it probably hurts Trey Mancini more than anybody else because he hits a lot of ground balls and he relies on a pretty high home run to fly ball ratio in order to provide for fantasy. So obviously last year was his first year back from cancer, and overall it was still a very strong season for him, but he did wear down final couple of months of the season, which I think is totally fine and even expected for him. But yeah, I think if it hurts anyone, it could hurt Mancini the most.
Mancini didn't pull that many of his home runs only 3 of them went the opposite way, but he had a bunch to left center and center. So depending on the configuration and where it is,
I know left center. I know left center is a big, I think that's where they want to make the most extensive changes. Not that that's necessarily going to mean.
It stinks, in my opinion. I just don't like it. Like this kind of thing where, we're losing because of our park. Well, your opponents play there too. And so whatever effect it has, you would think, and I've seen someone say, well, they've been drafting a lot of left-handed hitters, and I don't know, I don't think you'd maybe you just change the park every 15 years, depending on what the upcoming crop of players looks like. But I don't know. It seems like a solution in search of a problem for Baltimore, and people like home runs.
Yeah, they do indeed. I don't have an issue with it, trying to get closer to a neutral park. I was reading more about it, and they have the most home runs hit in Camden Yards than any other park since they've opened in 1992. So, that I think there's only 8 or 9 other parks that have been open since that time period, but they have the most home runs hit in their park. So they're trying to rectify that somewhat. Again, their pitching hasn't been good, so that's part of the problem, but maybe this can go towards helping those pitchers. Let's get into ADP, risers, and fallers here. For those wondering, how many drafts are actually happening right now? So from October 1st through November 30th, there were 42 drafts done over at the NFBC. From December 1st on, post-lockout, there have been 72 drafts done. So I would say a decent amount of data. 42 drafts early versus 72 drafts since December 1st. And I conjured up the data. Thank you, Chris, for teaching me how to do some things on Excel to figure this out. And found out the biggest
VLOOKUP gang.
Yes, VLOOKUP. And it has completely changed my life. I told Chris that he's woken a sleeping giant because I have all these different kind of things that I want to look into now. And
that's continuing Al Melchior's his impact on CBS Fantasy, because he taught me that one 8 years ago.
Oh, well, thank you, Al Melchior. And speaking of which,
you're gonna have to teach me too. I don't even know what it does, but Frank is gushing about it. It must be good.
Scott, I'm going to share
this is going to make me a lot less valuable to the company.
I'm going to share a few Google Sheets with you, Scotty, and it I have everything in one place now. It's fun. It's fun when you're trying to look at a bunch of data together for a bunch of different players. But anyway, the biggest risers, we'll kind of move quickly, keyword quickly, through some of these players, and then the movement inside the top 150 players. Then we'll spend a little bit more time on those. But first up, the biggest riser during this stretch has been Corey Knebel, who, unsurprisingly, he signed a 1-year, $10 million deal with the Phillies just before December, and expected as of now to be the Phillies closer. We don't know if they're going to make any other moves after the lockout ends, but he was very good in 2021. 25.2 innings, but a 2.45 ERA, 0.97 WHIP, over 10 Ks per 9, and the velocity on the fastball was much closer to where he was pre-Tommy John surgery. So, Scott, are you assuming as of now that Corey Knebel is the closer for the Phillies?
Yeah, I think, well, obviously the change in ADP would suggest that is the widespread assumption. And I think Dave Dombrowski even said after the signing, I can't find the quote now, but he said they're not in the market for a closer after the signing happened, something like that. It's not a direct quote, but that was the gist of it. And of course, Corey Knebel's been pretty high in closer in the past before Tommy John surgery. And it's not like you look at the Phillies roster and I guess Jose Alvarado, that could be an alternative, but they've that's been tried a few times already and it hasn't gone well. So Hector Neris is gone, obviously. Ian Kennedy, that really didn't work out after they got him, and now he's a free agent. So, I think Corey Knebel is the odds-on favorite to begin as the Phillies closer.
And I could see him making an Ian Kennedy-esque impact for fantasy, at least before the trade, the kind of season he was having. He missed 3 months with a lat injury. That's something to keep in mind. But I guess the fact that it's not related to his shoulder or elbow is probably a good sign in that regard. But, we've seen him be an elite fantasy closer for 1 year. We've seen him be a good fantasy closer for one other year. So it's hard to know how he's going to hold up to pitching every other day or pitching multiple days in a row, that kind of stuff. But it's a very exciting skill set. He looked really good last season when we did see him. So I think there's reasons to be optimistic about him.
Yeah, and the swinging strike rate really got back on track too, 12.7%. The last time we saw him healthy back in 2018, that was 13.2%. So not in the same range as other elite relievers, but close to where he was when he was a high-end closer a couple of years ago. This next one is obviously an interesting situation. It's Marcell Ozuna, who's moved up 103 spots to pick 200, and he was given a retroactive 20-game suspension for violating the league's domestic violence policy. And not trying to make light of that situation, but I think eventually we're going to have to talk about the realistic possibility that Marcell Ozuna is going to be playing baseball this upcoming season with the Atlanta Braves or with another team. I assume as of now, it's going to be with the Braves because he's still on their roster. But in the shortened season, he was amazing. He was the #1 outfielder in Roto. He was the 7th overall player, 338 batting average, 16 homers, 56 RBI in 60 games. Chris,
18 homers.
18 home runs. Yeah, over 60. What did I say?
16.
Okay. Well, yeah, he had 18 home runs. And Chris, I think this move is warranted. And I think if we get more confirmation that he's going to play, he's probably going to move up even more.
Yeah, I mean, right now we just don't know what the Braves' plans are for him, whether they intend to welcome him back, whether they intend to welcome him back as an everyday player. But we've seen, Odubel Herrera is someone who had a domestic violence suspension, and the Phillies ultimately did bring him back. It's a different organization. I don't know if the Braves have any similar situations, but, it's the kind of thing where, this is part of the job, right? Like if there's a player who's out there, we have to talk about him if he's going to be fantasy relevant. From what we've seen, Marcell Ozuna can be very, very relevant for fantasy. His upside is probably very similar to Nick Castellanos. And if we knew he was going to be active and playing a full season, I'm not sure how much further down you'd rank him than someone like Castellanos. Definitely lower.
Yeah.
But
so,
the upside we've seen from Ozuna is really, really high.
I have him. How much did he end up playing this past year? Like 2 months?
48 games.
Yeah.
He was pretty bad in those games.
It was
very bad.
It was close to the 60-game sample from the previous year, and it was not good. And he's had an up and down career. I have him 47th right now, and that is kind of a fence straddling ranking, which I try to avoid. But obviously, this is a particularly unusual circumstance. My read on things is that he will be a part of the team in 2022, and I'm mostly basing that on the statement that the Braves released when MLB revealed the penalties for Ozuna and that it was a retroactive suspension, and as far as they were concerned, he was allowed to play again. The statement was, any instance of domestic violence is unacceptable, and we fully support the decision by the commissioner's office regarding Marcell. We are encouraged to know that Marcell has accepted full responsibilities for his actions and is taking the necessary measures to learn and grow from the situation. Reading between the lines, that sounds like they're willing to have him back. So that's kind of what I'm thinking. And if that's true, I'll have to move him up from 47th in my outfield rankings. But he would probably still be outside my top 30.
Yeah. I could see, if we get confirmation that he's going to play, again, the ADP since December 1st is right around pick 200. He probably moves up another 75 spots, gets inside the top 150, but we'll see what happens with that situation. Chris, last year we made fun of you because you would always recommend Alex Cobb for the stream of the day. And it turns out that you were forward thinking. You were ahead of all of us because he signs with the San Francisco Giants, which can you really find a better place to sign as a starting pitcher right now? He has moved up 58 spots since December 1st up to pick 270. So he's still going pretty late. Late round flyer, sleeper with upside right now. And last year he was good. 3.76 ERA, 1.26 whip, 98 strikeouts, over 93 and a third innings pitched, over a 50% ground ball rate, over a strikeout per inning, which I mentioned, 11.2 swinging strike rate. And the splitter is the bread and butter pitch. 20% swinging strike rate or better on that splitter, 3 straight seasons. The Giants have a way with pitchers like this, Chris.
Well, I think first of all we should show some respect to the pitch, because I believe it is referred to as the thing. So because it's not really like a true splitter, but it's not really a changeup. It's not like Kevin Gausman's splitter, you know. But yeah, the peripherals last season were quite good. That was a big part of why I was interested in him. He had a 3.38 xFIP, 2.92 FIP. Sierra was right in that range, 3.83. So yeah, I think you kind of look at the collective and, you know, maybe the Giants can give him a little more help than the Angels did. And maybe he can be a fantasy relevant starting pitcher. I think he's probably not someone who's worth moving inside of the top 50 just because the position is deep. But, you know, after that, I think in the 60 to 70 range, there's upside there with Alex Cobb.
We have to see him stay healthy too. He hasn't thrown more than 100 innings since 2018 when he threw 152. So hopefully he can get back on track there. The Giants have done a great job with these reclamation projects. Anthony DeSclafani, obviously Kevin Gausman, who's no longer with the team, but man, they've really done a really good job with these pitchers. You
could say they're the anti-Orioles, which is where he was playing before, where if a pitcher signs with the Orioles, you generally just, well, we'll see that guy when he gets out of Baltimore, maybe.
Oh, I was just going to... Jordan Lyles was the pitcher that they signed in the offseason. I was going to... Well, there goes Jordan Lyles. I guess we can't draft him. Next one up here is Connor Joe. He's up 54 spots to pick 343. I'm taking credit for this one because I've talked about Connor Joe multiple times on this podcast in the offseason, Scott. We had Justin Mason on, and he was all over Cedric Mullins last year. I was like, oh, who's this year's Cedric Mullins? And I mentioned Lane Thomas as a possibility. I like him quite a bit. And I mentioned Connor Joe.
I thought I mentioned Connor Joe. I thought that was my pick.
I don't know. Maybe
you agreed with me.
Maybe we both did. But I do like Connor Joe quite a bit. And he's like Frank Schwindel, 29-year-old journeyman. He's performed well in the minors. And he was good last year. Mm-hmm. Played 63 games, 285 batting average, 8 homers, and 848 OPS. Walks a lot. Didn't strike out much. Lots of line drives. He was leading off for the Rockies. Scott, I think he just continues to move up, especially if we get any confirmation that he is going to play every day for the team.
Yeah. I mean, that's really what it all rests on for me, is because he had entered that place where, okay, he's our leadoff hitter. He did such a good job. I forget who he was filling in for. I think it was maybe Charlie Blackmon. I forget who was injured. He came in as an injury replacement, and they decided to keep him in the lineup. They were even going to play him in center field. And then he got hurt right away and missed the rest of the season. So we didn't get to see that narrative play out in a natural way. And of course, the Rockies aren't known for their decision making, particularly when it comes to the fantasy game. And so you don't want to put too much faith in them to make the right decision here. But of course, anyone who gets a chance to play regularly at Coors Field is going to have sleeper appeal, especially one who made the kind of impact he did last year for the couple months he was around, and especially one who throughout not just what we saw of him last year, but his minor league career, exceptional plate discipline for Connor Joe. It's not another Sam Hilliard situation where he's just going to bury himself in strikeouts. So, potential to be a big sleeper here.
Forgive me, but obviously I wasn't on the podcast late last season, so I have to ask, where did he come from? Where did he go? Where did he come from, Connor Joe?
Chris.
Yeah. I'm sorry.
Let's move on to the next one.
This is what you've been missing, folks.
Yeah, I mean, look, this was an element of the podcast that we were definitely missing. I'm not sure that Scott and I were coming up with Dr. Next one up here is Oneil Cruz. He's up 34 spots to pick 229. I tweeted out a screenshot of, the biggest risers in ADP. And someone actually responded to me that in their most recent 2 drafts that Oneil Cruz was drafted in the 150 to 175 range, which is just bonkers in my opinion. I think this is just solely based on the Steamer projection, Scott, where people are just kind of freaking out because he's projected for 281 batting average, 20 homers, 14 steals, over 110 games. Like on a per game basis, that is a near star player for fantasy. So I'm not sure that he's going to get there. Again, he's a highly regarded prospect. I don't want to downplay that possibility, but these projections are pretty lofty for him.
It's the 281 batting average that really gets me. Like, he's not going to hit 281. I feel very confident saying that a 6'7" rookie is not going to hit 281. The strikeouts were surprisingly not bad throughout his minor league career, considering his size, but they got worse every step up the ladder, and they weren't great by the end of his minor league career. However, he had developed monster power potential by the end, as many scouts thought he would. He was a viable base stealer. I still think 14 and 110 games is probably about as optimistic as you could hope for there, but he'll be some bit of a factor in stolen bases. But then, there's also the hurdle of playing time. He did come up at the end of last year for 2 games. He hit the hardest. He hit a ball harder than any Pirates player ever has in the StatCast era in those 2 games. So, he made an impression. But he still has to win a job in spring training, and considering the Pirates aren't competing for anything, I don't know. I don't think that's a sure thing. Now, I mean, the projection has him for only 110 games, so I guess it's not saying that either. But to target him in drafts, you're obviously hoping he does.
Next up here, we have Elias Diaz, who is up 33 spots to pick 258. And Chris, I don't really think that there's much explanation for him moving up outside of the fact that he's a catcher and he doesn't suck and he plays in Coors Field.
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty much it, but I don't know. There's not that much to get excited about there. I feel like what we saw last year, probably pretty close to a best case scenario for him. He's got that he plays in Coors Field going for him. But a lot of people need to draft too, including everyone in NFC leagues. So yeah, I think, I don't know. There's not much to say there. I don't think he's a difference maker, but he's fine.
Come on, Chris. I mean, I'm doing a draft right now. Got him as my second catcher. Travis d'Arnaud is my first catcher, which probably not the best combination of catchers, but we'll make it work. Blake Treinen, next one up here. He's up 32 spots to pick 182. And Scott, I think this is partially closers getting pushed up in this format right now. And I think people just believing there's a realistic chance that Kenley Jansen could sign elsewhere this offseason.
Yeah, it does. Look, any free agent who hasn't signed yet, and this pains me to say as a Braves fan who has never wanted a player to stick around more than I want Freddie Freeman to stick around. I would say that any player who didn't sign before the lockout, there are real questions as to what the market looks like for him. And it's, the Dodgers have seemed content to bring Kenley Jansen back multiple times in the past. But maybe that's not so true anymore. And Blake Treinen, like, he had a huge season as a setup man. He had that one great year as a closer in Oakland where he looked like the best reliever in baseball and then kind of regressed. It was more of a, back to being more sort of a middle reliever type, but he was dominant again last year, more so than Jansen had a fine year, but I would say Blake Treinen was even better. So I could see the Dodgers going that route. It'd be kind of weird for the Dodgers to promote a backup closer to closer because they're the Dodgers, but they let Corey Seager go and they let somebody else go too. I don't know. They haven't been behaving in very Dodgers-like ways.
They re-signed Chris Taylor, which is kind of a move they did once Corey Seager signed with the Rangers Did they lose anyone else? I don't think so. I know they signed Cody Bellinger to a 1-year deal. I think that was some kind of like avoiding arbitration type thing. So, yeah, I think you're right. It would be weird to see them kind of promote a backup, but in this case, I mean, the backup is pretty damn good, and he has closing experience. So, yeah, Blake Treinen this past season, 1.99 ERA, 0.98 WHIP. He was awesome.
They let Scherzer go to the Mets. That's what I was thinking.
Right. How can we forget Max Scherzer?
You know, I will say with him, if they bring back, my train of thought got derailed. Kenley Jansen. If they bring back Kenley Jansen, I would bet Kenley Jansen's still going to be the closer, though.
Yeah.
Oh, for sure.
It's one of those things that fantasy players have been doing for like 4 years now, of like, oh, Kenley Jansen's not that good. He's going to lose the job this year, and like if he's back in Los Angeles for any amount of money, he's going to be the closer.
Yeah. Yeah. He kind of had a bounce back season too.
Yeah.
In terms of velocity and strikeout rate and everything. It looked like he had kind of regained some of what he lost, which maybe meant he priced himself out of what the Dodgers are comfortable with. I don't know. I do want to mention Oneil Cruz's strikeout rate specifically last year in the minors was better than I thought. It was over 20%, but it wasn't like bad. So I still say he's not going to hit 281.
Well, if he hits that steamer projection, I mean, that's a similar projection over 150 games to like probably not that far of what Cedric Mullins is projected for.
Right.
Like, you're talking about a second-round player.
Right.
If he really hit 280 with a 30 homer, 20 steal pace. So
yeah,
that's really, really aggressive. That's better than a lot of highly touted prospects get from projection systems. So I would...
If Oneil Cruz hits 260, I think, that would be optimistic to me. Like if he does that, he's probably going to have a great year, but I wouldn't count on more than that.
And I would just caution that, it's not that dissimilar to Ke'Bryan Hayes last season where, I mean, we saw Ke'Bryan Hayes actually for a little bit more than we saw. I mean, he got like 90 plate appearances. So, we actually had more to go on, and Ke'Bryan Hayes kind of fell on his face. Injuries played a part in that too. But, Pirates haven't had the best track record when it comes to their young guys of late.
Next up, we have two starting pitchers who have similarly moved up and into a close range as well. Steven Matz up 28 spots, Jon Gray up 28 spots to pick 257 and 263 respectively for those two starting pitchers. Steven Matz signs with the St. Louis Cardinals, who have the best defense in baseball. I think they had like 3 or 4 Gold Glovers this past season. And then Jon Gray signed a 4-year deal with the Texas Rangers. We get him out of Coors Field. We still don't know exactly what that's going to do to his pitches and his movement and, his ability to bounce back. I mean, it's just so weird going from Coors Field to anywhere else in baseball. Yeah. So we'll see how that affects him overall. But, I mean, there's always been hope that if he got out of Coors Field, out of Colorado, that, there could be more on the horizon here for Jon Gray. So, Chris, I'm putting you on the clock. Who would you rather have, Steven Matz or Jon Gray?
I think Jon Gray kind of has to be the answer just for the potential strikeouts that he would bring to the table that Steven Matz probably can't. It's interesting. Jon Gray has always been one of those, if we just get him out of Coors, but he's actually been slightly better for his career at home. So it's always been hard to know what to make of that, but we know about the Coors Field hangover effect. We know about just how much pitching at Coors Field in general, kind of changes the way you have to pitch. So I don't know if you can just say, well, he had a 4.65 ERA on the road for his career, so he's probably not that good. I think he's a really talented pitcher, and I do think he's someone who probably, like, 250, you're talking about one of your last-round picks in a 12-team league. I would say that's a great way to spend that pick, and I would be surprised if that's what he costs, especially, after last season making his slider, really his, it's always been his primary secondary pitch, but he almost threw it as often as his fastball last season, and that is a really, really good pitch for him. So that could be a big thing, especially playing in what is a pretty good pitcher's park.
The big hope for Jon Gray and I've seen Eno Saris say this too. So this isn't just coming from me. I think Eno Saris is smarter than me. So I was comforted to see him saying the same sort of thing I was saying, is that to succeed at Coors Field, Jon Gray kind of had to neuter what made him such a big prospect in the first place. He really had to simplify his arsenal and his approach, just because certain pitches don't work the same at Coors Field. You know, that's really the bigger problem for pitchers than even the whole BABIP issue that's created there. So he's been doing that a long time, and no idea if he's even capable of recapturing what he used to have before joining the Rockies. So it's, you know, obviously just leaving Coors Field is a good thing too. I imagine usability, it'll probably be there for him. He'll be at least a streamer type, because he was practically that in Colorado. But like, there is this chance that he rediscovers what made him this third overall pick out of college and really takes off. I think there's a chance of that.
I actually like each of the starting pitchers we've mentioned to this point. I like Matz too. I don't think he has as much upside as Jon Gray, but I think a pretty high floor, especially with that defense behind him. I like Alex Cobb, as I mentioned, and Jon Gray with that strikeout upside. Scott, who would you rather have of those three? Matz, Cobb, Jon Gray?
Cobb. And I really don't understand the Steven Matz thing. There are some people who swear he should be in my top 40 starting pitchers, and we're disappointed that I left him out.
Do these people realize Steven Matz is 30?
I don't know.
I don't think he should be a top 40 starting pitcher, but look, at the end of your draft, you're drafting for upside, right? No doubt about it in my mind, Jon Gray and Alex Cobb have more upside than Steven Matz. I think if you're doing, deeper drafts right now and you're looking for someone who has a safer floor later on in your draft, I think Steven Matz can be that guy. He's battled injuries, but for the most part, I think he's going to give you a high 3s ERA, a serviceable whip, just under a strikeout per inning. Again, with a really, really good defense behind him. So I think
he could be Marco Gonzalez good, potentially.
The thing that's tough about him is he shares a lot of similarities with Andrew Heaney in terms of his approach. They both throw sinkers.
Chris,
as their primary fastballs.
Don't wish that evil on Steven Matz. Come on.
They throw sinkers up in the zone, which actually leads to a pretty high whiff rate for their sinkers relative to all sinkers, but it's still a sinker and you're still throwing it high in the zone. So that's why Steven Matz and Andrew Heaney, that plays a big part in why those guys are so homer prone, or tend to be at least.
All right, I've got a few more risers that I want to get to, really the ones that are moving up the most inside of the top 150. But before we get to that, I want to thank everybody for listening and watching us. If you didn't know, you can subscribe to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/fantasybaseball today. You hit that little notification bell and you'll get notification every time we either go live or we drop a new video. And for anyone out there who's not following us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, we would appreciate that. So thank you very much. And a reminder that we have a FBT reunion coming on tomorrow's podcast. Adam Azer, Nando DeFino joining Scott White and myself tomorrow. So again, I don't know how much fantasy information you're going to get out of this one. We're going to have some fun. We'll play some games, but definitely be around for that, because it's going to be a lot of fun. Let's take a quick break. When we return, we'll get to the rest of these risers on Fantasy Baseball Today. All right, so the biggest movers inside of the top 150, Justin Verlander up 22 spots to pick 107. Let's move a little bit quicker on these so that we can get to the fallers as well. Scott, I know your thoughts about Justin Verlander. Chris, we haven't heard from you all offseason regarding him. Verlander is going to be 17 months removed from Tommy John surgery by spring training, obviously 18 months by the regular season. The number one overall player back in 2019. How far do you think that this could actually climb? He's approaching the top 100.
Yeah, he'll be 17 months removed from Tommy John surgery. He'll be 39 years removed from being born. But yeah, the last time we saw him, he was arguably, not the best pitcher in baseball because Jacob deGrom exists, but as close as you can get. And given the volume that he gave you, that's the concern, though, is the volume, right? Coming back from the injury, given his age, there's so many question marks, but I think he can be effective. it's just really hard to see him giving you that 220 inning season, which is something we've, kind of, I don't know if come to expect, but certainly come to understand as part of Justin Verlander's range of outcomes. It probably isn't this season. And so how effective can he be coming back? Impossible to say. An impossible player to rank. We know how good he can be, but I don't know. Can you guys think of any comps for a 39-year-old coming back from Tommy John surgery?
If you gave me long enough to, probably, but not on this. Well, maybe like Chris Carpenter. I don't think he was quite that old, but
yeah,
he came back and had a really good season in his late 30s for the Cardinals. But yeah, I mean, even 200 innings would be a record for a pitcher first back from Tommy John surgery. I think Steven Strasburg has the record. Or no, wait, it's Matt Harvey. Matt Harvey has the record for innings from a pitcher back from Tommy John surgery.
Either one of those is the comp you want.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, Steamer has Verlander for 175 innings. I think that's probably optimistic, but we'll see. I mean, as long as whenever he's been healthy, he's been a workhorse in the past.
That's the thing for me is like, it's probably not going to be 175.
Probably not.
I think it's probably going to be either less than 100 or close to 200. Like it's really hard to see a middle ground there unless he, sprains his ankle and misses a month. But in terms of, like, it either goes disastrously wrong or it's probably pretty good.
Yeah, they have some depth there. They have Christian Javier in the bullpen who they can use as a starter too. So if they wanted to come up with like a phantom IL stint or maybe, skip him through the rotation a few times, maybe go 6-man to kind of, keep him fresh and space him out. I think those are all possibilities.
Chris Carpenter nearly won the Cy Young in that first season back. He finished second, 192.2 innings, 2.24 ERA.
So that 192.2 innings was technically more than Harvey had in the year I'm thinking of. He had 187-ish.
But he pitched in the playoffs.
But, well, actually, I just think it was Carpenter came back late the previous season, so he wasn't.
Okay.
He wasn't immediately back from Tommy John surgery.
Chris Taylor is the next one up here. He's moved up 19 spots to pick 141, which I think makes sense because Corey Seager has signed with the Rangers. So, Taylor should play every day. He was very good this past season. I don't really know that there's much more to add on him. So we will move on to Tyler Stevenson, who's up 17 spots to pick 147. Scott, do you think that this is maybe moving up too aggressively inside the top 150? Obviously, Tucker Barnhart was traded away back in November. And, Stevenson has some prospect pedigree and, could potentially be hitting in the middle of, I don't think a great Reds lineup, but it's a great place to hit.
Yeah. I'm trying to see where I have him ranked real quick. I have him 184th. So versus 147. I mean, that might just, that's pretty high. That's pretty high. 147 is about where I have.
You've got catchers generally kind of high, I noticed in going through your rankings.
Well, if you're saying
Not
that about
taking
me
shots.
and I have him 40 spots lower than the ADP here for Tyler Stevenson, that's that really says something. So, yeah, he's a breakout candidate, but his batted ball data wasn't as impressive as the actual production in his split role behind the plate with Tucker Barnhart, and I think people are being a little too optimistic with this ranking. I won't be drafting much of Stevenson. Like I'd rather have Mitch Garver and just hope he stays healthy than bank on this breakthrough for, bank on Tyler Stevenson becoming more than just part of that blob of catchers that rounds out every mixed league roster. The Sean Murphys of the world, him being part of that group.
Because last time we saw him in the minors really was 2019 when he was 22 years old and played 89 games and had a 782 OPS, which is not that far off from what he did last season. We just don't know what happened in the intervening time and whether, he developed, whether he stagnated, but the underlying stats from last season, like you said, Scott, not particularly impressive. And I think he's probably like 150-ish sounds way too high for Tyler Stevenson.
I'll point out what I didn't like most about him was the ground ball rate, 49.6% last year. But, you look at his minor league profile, and he never really hit that many ground balls. He's routinely hit a lot of line drives. So I think there's a chance that those ground balls can come down a little bit. And then maybe as a result, we see a little bit more power. But yeah, even with that, I think this is probably an optimistic rank on Tyler Stevenson. The last one I want to mention is Josh Bell, who has moved up 11 spots to pick 134. And I think early in the offseason, people just kind of looked at his surface level stats and didn't realize that he was awful in April, like a lot of hitters were. And then from May 1st on, Josh Bell was awesome. 279 batting average, 25 home runs with an 865 OPS. So if he can just kind of carry that over heading into next year, then I think he's actually a fine value where he's going at pick 134.
But you know what we say.
What do you say?
Full season statistics are more predictive. But April was just so crazy. Like, nobody was good except for the example's not thinking of me. There's like this one player who was awesome in April.
I got it. It was JD Martinez, Scott.
Yeah, that works. That's not who I'm thinking of. But yeah, there was somebody who you mean Mercedes. That's who I was thinking of.
Oh.
Like, he was the only guy who hit in April, basically. And then he was terrible the rest of the way.
Yeah, the underlying numbers for Josh Bell are still strong. They're not quite 2019, but still didn't strike out much. Still hit the ball really hard. I do want to take a look at his splits and see how that. He was fine against lefties last season.
Yeah, he's typically bad against lefties, and at the start of the season, he wasn't playing against them. Ryan Zimmerman was playing for him. But yeah, as the season went along, he actually got a lot better.
A, who knows if Zimmerman's going to be back? B, we're hopeful there's NLDH. C, they started playing Josh Bell in the outfield late in the year, which is what he primarily played in the minors. So clearly they were more invested in getting his bat in the lineup. So that's, I don't know. I may do it for a third straight year. Tell everybody to draft Josh Bell, even though it's let us down the previous two.
I wouldn't say that it let you down last year, Scott.
Yeah, people dropped him
with him. But
people dropped him.
Right.
Yeah.
I had him in deeper leagues and I held on to. I mean, you don't really have a choice there, but he came through. He was very good. I think he's fine. If he's someone you wait back on, back end starter for first base or a corner infielder in a roto league, perfectly fine with that for Josh Bell. Let's hit on some of the biggest fallers here. And very obviously, Max Muncy has fallen 58 spots to pick 160 during this stretch. And we just don't really have a clue when it comes to this UCL injury that he's dealing with. There was an interview. He went on MLB Network back in, I think it was either October or November, and he said that he's not healing as quickly as he wanted to. And he also revealed that it was a partial tear of his UCL. So these are all pretty scary things, and it makes sense that Max Muncy is falling. And I think, Scott, he'll continue to fall.
Yeah, I moved him way down in my rankings. I'm gonna need to see him looking right in spring training before I move him back up, and I'm not optimistic.
That being said, Shohei Ohtani was pretty awesome hitting through a fully torn UCL. Gleyber Torres had a torn UCL and had Tommy John surgery. He came back and was the same guy. That was as a prospect. Did Miguel Sano have Tommy John when he was a prospect?
That sounds
Salvador Perez had Tommy John when he was closer to Max Muncy's age, and he's looked better than ever since returning. But the issue is lost time more than anything.
Well,
no, they could do like
had the surgery.
What?
Muncy hasn't had the surgery.
Right, exactly.
So it just kind of lingers over him, and you don't know.
You don't know when they're going to shut him down for the year.
Yeah. Or he may not.
Or he may not. And you bring up the Ohtani example, and if there is the DH in the NL, maybe they'll just play Muncy there all year. But if they were thinking his UCL isn't going to let him play the field, he would have just had the surgery at the start of the offseason, right? So I don't know. It's messy.
I think there's a chance where if this goes too far the other way, and so it's, over the past month and a half, he's dropped 58 spots. I would assume that continues, to drop further. Then, if you can kind of pick him up as a bench option and then just kind of wait on it and see what happens, then I think there could be profit on that. So just keep that in mind. But obviously, we need more information when it comes to Max Muncy. This one's kind of interesting. Vidal Brujan. He's a prospect with the Tampa Bay Rays, and he came up last year for a short period of time. And I remember the first game he played, I think he got a hit or he walked, and then he stole second base, he stole third base, and we were all like, oh, man, it's happening for Vidal Brujan. And then it didn't happen for Vidal Brujan. He has dropped 45 spots to pick 328, so more of a late-round option, a very late-round option. But it just doesn't really make sense because Joey Wendell was traded from the Tampa Bay Rays back in November. He went over to the Marlins. So I'm not saying Vidal Brujan's going to play, but there is at least a chance. There's a chance that there's playing time available here. So I don't know, Chris. This one's kind of interesting with Vidal Brujan.
Yeah, I mean, part of it was he hit the 7 home runs in May of last season and then got called up. And so it was like, oh, boy, is he really like taking a big leap? And then he hit 5 more home runs the rest of the season, including the majors. So it's really tough with the Rays because you never know. Even if he breaks camp with the roster, is he going to be an everyday player? But I think the skill set is interesting enough with the speed, especially that if it looks like he's going to be on the roster on opening day, 328 should be a steal. You know, like Miles Straw is going a lot higher than that.
Yeah, Miles Straw is a leadoff hitter as opposed to
Sure
what I expect Brujan to be if he is on the club, which is utility guy. So, yeah, I mean, this is actually pretty close to where I have him ranked. It's like 7 spots behind where I have him ranked, 321. I'm kind of a Brujan downer because I mean the hopes for power development quickly evaporated last year, and so you're talking about a guy with good contact skills who's really, really fast, and that's just not a profile that you see get much playing time in the majors these days, particularly not for a team like the Rays. I think they'll value his defensive versatility, but I don't see him getting tons of playing time. Could be wrong. That's just in that organization especially. I think people are a little too optimistic there. Well, maybe not anymore. I don't know.
A few others here that I'll mention, but don't really want to talk much about. Carlos Santana, he's dropped 44 spots to pick 477. He played through a quad injury the final 2 months of the season, and prospects are coming. Nick Prado, we talked about last week. Vinny Pasquantino is a first base / DH type prospect as well. So there are many on the way for the Kansas City Royals. I think it looks pretty bad here for Carlos Santana. Chris Paddack has dropped 43 spots to pick 411. Ton of injuries last year, ineffectiveness, not really sure what his role is at this point. Is he going to be in the rotation? We know that the top 4 spots are going to be occupied by Musgrove, Darvish, Blake Snell, Clevenger, as long as those guys are healthy. And just before the lockout, they were close to signing Nick Martinez. Nick Martinez, ring a bell? Yeah, I mean, he used to pitch for the Texas Rangers a couple of years ago. He went over to, I believe it was Korea, reinvented himself, was really good there, and now kind of has this like Miles Michaelis thing going on where he's trying to work his way back into the majors. They were close to signing him, and it sounded like they wanted to use him as a starter. So I really just don't know what this does for Chris Paddack. So time will tell there. Brandon Marsh.
He could use a change of scenery. But I will point out his curveball was actually really good last season. He still only threw it about 12% of the time, but it was actually 36% whiff rate, 225 expected WOBA allowed. Maybe he's too fastball reliant. I can't remember who we were talking about yesterday, but I can't remember. But it's hard to be effective throwing your fastball 60% of the time. And he's got potentially 2 useful and including 1 elite secondary pitch.
Yeah. So look, glass half full. If you want to try to pick this guy up in like a deep dynasty league, you can probably get him for nothing right now.
It's free.
Chris, I had a lot of Paddack last year, so I watched him and he was bad, man. He had nothing. There was no confidence, no conviction in his pitches. He just it's like this was someone who relied on pinpoint control. And he just didn't have it. He like missing spots within the zone. And then when he did that, he would get hit hard. It was rough.
I think he could use just like a new sceneries.
Trade him to the Marlins.
That's what everyone likes to do, right? Jesus Luzardo, I actually just
probably sign Jorge Julio and trade him back.
Yeah, that's true. He was originally a Marlin. That's true.
I just took Jesus Luzardo in one of my drafts, so hoping for a bounce back.
Although it was Fernando Rodney, not Jorge.
Oh, Fernando
Julio.
Rodney. Sorry.
Yeah.
Oh man, a few outfielders here. Brandon Marsh has dropped 43 spots. A lot of strikeouts last year. Does have some prospect pedigree. Little power, little speed. I think that one's kind of interesting. Not really sure why he's dropping, but he is dropping. Aaron Hicks, another one. He's dropped 42 spots. He's going very late in drafts right now. A bunch of injuries, but as of now, the way the Yankees roster is constructed, he would be an everyday player until he gets hurt right now. So we'll see what happens once the lockout ends there. Jameson Taillon, another one. He's dropped 30 spots. Scott, I think people just didn't realize that he's likely not going to be ready for opening day. And on top of that, he wasn't really great last year either.
Yeah, he wasn't. It was a disappointment. He did reinvent himself in the ways that were promised. More four-seamers, good spin on the four-seamer. Going just off memory now. But the results weren't there. It wasn't getting strikeouts really. And yeah, I don't have that much hope for him anymore.
The biggest moves inside of the top 175 picks, Lance McCullers has dropped 38 spots to pick 167. And we're still waiting to learn more about this arm injury that he's dealing with. He got shut down in the postseason with a forearm injury. Obviously, he's had a bunch of arm injuries in the past. So we're really just kind of waiting to learn more about this situation. But Chris, it doesn't surprise me that Lance McCullers has dropped this much.
Yeah, I think if you draft him, it's with the intention of him being a bench or late, low end starting pitcher who, if you get 20 great starts out of him, if you get 20 good starts out of him, you're thrilled with that outcome. So that range seems fine.
Mm-hmm. Luis Severino, Scott, not really sure what to expect from him either. He returned last year. He made some relief appearances, actually pitched in the Yankees wildcard game against the Red Sox. And he looked pretty good in that game, but he's dropped 22 spots to pick 175. I have a theory. I think people early in draft season, they just saw the name Luis Severino and they got excited and they drafted him. And then they realized, all right, well, he's coming back from all these injuries. We haven't seen him in a while. And so now it's kind of taken a little bit of a step back. What do you think about Severino?
Usually people forget about the Severino types. I have him. So he's 175 since the lockout, and he was going 22 spots earlier. So I actually have him about where he was going earlier. I don't think that was too high for him. I don't think it's is it a slam dunk? Have the Yankees said, yes, he's a part of our rotation to begin next year? I don't think that's the case. And obviously if I'm assuming it with the ranking, but obviously if it turns out not to be the case, I'll be downgrading him quite a bit.
Yeah, I think that's it's a fair assumption as of now. Roster Resource has obviously Garrett Cole, Jordan Montgomery, Luis Severino, Nestor Cortez, and Domingo Germán to start the year. And then whenever Jameson Taillon is ready, he'll, jump into that mix, and whoever between Germán and Nestor Cortez will probably get removed from the rotation. But yeah, I would say Severino is safe. At least I think so.
Yeah, I mean, he's still in the prime of his career, and he was top 10 type pitcher in fantasy before he got hurt. So I don't know. I think around 150 where I have him is a solid enough discount to take a shot at that kind of upside.
Yeah, I love the bottom half of the top 200 or bottom 150 to 200 range where you can take that flyer on Luis Severino, take that flyer on Noah Syndergaard. I like that range quite a bit. Mike Clevenger a little earlier, maybe. But I like the idea of taking shots on those guys in that range.
Let's say a 12-team league, Chris. What would you be comfortable with those guys as your SP5, the last pitcher in your starting rotation, or more as a bench option?
I think it would be really fun to get one of them as your SP5 and then one of them as a bench option. Just because the upside potential for that is really, really high, and it'll cost you very little.
Yeah.
I mean, your typical 12th to 15th round pick in a 12-team league, your typical player is going to bust. You're not going to get much from those guys. Those guys are potentially drops. So I think, I love the idea of taking Mike Clevenger. Did I mention him as well?
Yes.
Yeah. I think that's a good plan. I'm going to do quite a bit of that.
And I think it's a different situation compared to the Tommy John guys from last year, which oddly enough included Luis Severino and Noah Syndergaard, but also Chris Sale. But for those other names, we saw Severino come back for a little bit. We saw Syndergaard. I think it was 1 or 2 innings that he pitched. And Clevenger, he had Tommy John surgery even way back when. I think it was probably in like March of last year, maybe even earlier than that. It might have been even January or something like that. So like he's got some time here to build up. So it's not your typical like these guys had Tommy John in the middle of the season and we're drafting them and hoping for the best. It's there's a little bit more optimism with each.
It was in November of 2020 actually.
Yeah,
November.
So he's going to be.
He's like Verlander, where he's
20 months.
Yeah, he should be. I'm expecting Clevenger to be full go.
Mm-hmm.
I think I like Severino more, especially if you get into points leagues because he's got the RP eligibility. But it's close between him and Clevenger, with Syndergaard a little bit behind those two.
The last one I want to talk about, Chris, you were big on Ian Anderson last season. He has dropped 14 spots since December 1st, down to about pick 145. So it's not a huge drop, but, about a round. And I think people are really just kind of deep diving him and realizing that while he had a 3.58 ERA, all the underlying numbers were much worse. And the strikeout to walk ratio was just not nearly as good as it was the year before. So where are you at on your boy Ian Anderson?
Higher than the consensus, or at least that ADP. I think he's a fine pitcher in the 10th round range. I think, probably a number 4 in that range makes sense. He's super young. We've seen one partial season and then one almost full season from him. He's made 30 starts overall. He's got a 3.25 ERA and a 1.2 WHIP. I think he's really talented. I think he's got some really good secondary pitches, and he wasn't great last season, the underlying numbers especially, but I don't know. I think it's a worthwhile bet on talent when it's that cheap. Like, you don't often see 23-year-old top prospects who have succeeded in the majors dropping to the 12th round or the 10th round range.
Yeah, this could turn out to be a mistake. If it's kind of just a leap of faith pick where maybe you don't look at the underlying numbers as much. It's just you watch him pitch and you can tell that he has pretty good stuff. So, Scott, what do you think about that? Maybe kind of turning a blind eye to the XFIP, the Sierra for Ian Anderson, and just kind of taking that leap of faith.
I am not so hopeful that there's another step for him to take, but I think he's a solid pitcher just as he is. I mean, it's not that big of a leap of faith if you treat him like a floor play, ton of ground balls, about a strikeout per inning. That's going to be a guy you're starting more often than not. And then if he is able to find the right pitch mix to take advantage of that changeup more, maybe use the curveball a little better. It's a pretty curveball to look at, but it's not a big, it's not a put away pitch for him the way the changeup has been. So, maybe I'm not, but I'm saying at his cost, you're not even really counting on a step forward.
Yeah. And the thing is, one thing that I think is interesting about him is the changeup was a new pitch for him last season. He didn't really have that coming up as a prospect. He was a fastball curveball guy. And so the fact that the changeup is this good, and it's a weird changeup. There was a really good piece on Fangraphs about his changeup and how different it is from nearly every other pitcher's changeup. But if he can figure out, a way to make that curveball a little better, like Scott said, I think he could take off.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, if he can ever find a way to lower the walks too, I wouldn't bet on it because that's basically who he's been even throughout his minor league career. But if it ever were to happen, then obviously that's how we could see Ian Anderson take an even further step forward as well. We're going to wrap there. For Scott and Chris, I am Frank. Thank you all for listening and watching Fantasy Baseball today. We'll be back again tomorrow with Nando and Adam. It's going to be a riot. Bye-bye.